Okay, let's unpack this. You're learning English, you're doing the work, building vocabulary, getting the grammar down. But then, when it's time to actually speak, there's that moment, right?
Hmm.
That little pause, that feeling of, is it translation? You know what you want to say, but it feels like your brain's doing this extra step, like running it through your native language first before the English comes out.
Absolutely. It's a really common hurdle.
Yeah.
Almost universal, I'd say, for language learners.
And it feels like such a bottleneck sometimes. It slows everything down.
It really does.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today, that whole internal process.
Mm.
Thinking first in your native language, getting the idea straight there, and then sort of trying to map it, translate it, convert it somehow into English before you can actually say it out loud.
Yes. The famous translation habit. It's like having this internal middleman, doesn't it? Taking your order in one language and then trying to replicate it perfectly in another.
Exactly. A linguistic go-between.
And anyone who's felt it knows
Mm.
that process, it doesn't just add a bit of time.
No, it could be significant.
It really slows you down, creates those awkward little hesitations. And maybe even worse, it can make your English sound, well, maybe a bit stiff, a little unnatural.
Yeah, sometimes even grammatically off,
Hmm.
because you're sort of subconsciously pulling in the sentence structure from your first language.
Right, which might work totally differently.
Precisely. So you're essentially adding this extra time-consuming layer to what ideally should be a much more direct process.
Mm-hmm.
Our source material for this deep dive
Mm-hmm.
really highlights that native speakers, well, naturally, they just skip this step entirely.
They don't have the middleman.
Nope. When they want to express an idea, the concept itself, and the right English words, the right sentence structure, it all just comes together directly. Almost instantly, really. There's no internal translation happening before they speak.
And that right there, that's the heart of our mission for this deep dive today, isn't it?
It is.
We're going to explore why this translation habit forms in the first place, which honestly is pretty fascinating from a cognitive angle.
It really is, yeah. How the brain wires itself.
And then, and this is the really practical bit, we'll lay out some concrete, actionable steps, like actual daily exercises you can start doing right now to train your brain to begin skipping that translation step more often.
Exactly. We're going to look at techniques specifically designed to build faster, more automatic connections, direct links between concepts, English words, and English sentence patterns.
So the goal is moving towards thinking directly in English.
That's the aim. So by the time we wrap up this deep dive, you should have a clear roadmap, a set of practical strategies you could actually implement immediately to start training your brain, making it smoother, making communication more confident.
Making English feel less like a code you have to constantly decipher under pressure.
Yes, and more like a natural way to express your thoughts.
Okay, sounds great. Let's get into it, starting with the root cause. Why does this translation habit get so, well, sticky, so ingrained? And what exactly is the goal we're aiming for by trying to break it?
Right, so the big question first. Why does this even happen? Why do so many learners, probably most learners at some point, fall into this pattern?
Mm-hmm.
Our source material points to a key reason, and it's rooted in how our brains naturally learn new things, especially early on when you're acquiring a language.
Okay.
The brain's default, kind of its most efficient strategy initially, is to connect new information back to something it already knows really, really well.
Which would be?
Your native language, exactly. The words, the concepts, they're already deeply embedded.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like your brain's this big filing system, right? And when you get a new file, say the English word cat, the easiest place to put it at first is to link it directly to the file you already have labeled cat in your native language.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You learn the sound cat, and your brain goes, okay, this new sound refers to that furry four-legged thing I already know, and I have a perfectly good, well-established label for that in my native language. Let's just connect this new cat sound to that existing label.
It's efficient for building vocabulary quickly at the start, I guess.
Absolutely. It's super effective for initial comprehension and for just being able to recall the meaning of new words. You have an anchor point.
There's the catch.
There's the catch. The challenge pops up because the more you rely on that system, that cross-referencing back to your native language,
The stronger that specific pathway becomes.
exactly.
Yeah.
You're reinforcing it constantly. Every time you learn a new word, maybe even a grammatical structure, by mentally comparing it back to your native language, you're strengthening that connection. The source calls it a deeply ingrained habit. It becomes the default route.
So later on, when you want to express the idea of that furry animal, maybe you want to say, my cat is hungry.
Hmm.
The quickest, most familiar path in your brain for the concept of cat leads first to the native language word.
That's the well-worn path that
Oh.
goes straight there. Then, because you're trying to speak English, your brain has to take that little detour. Okay, translate the native word back into the English word cat.
Uh-huh.
Now build the English sentence around it.
And that's the delay. That extra mental jump, that translation step, that's what adds the milliseconds, maybe even seconds.
That's precisely it. That's where the pause, the hesitation creeps in. It creates those gaps that can feel awkward, make your speech sound less fluid, less spontaneous. You're literally adding an extra processing step before your thoughts can become English words.
It's like you're forcing your brain to do double the work for every single concept.
You really are. You're creating a bottleneck in your own communication pipeline.
Okay, so the ultimate goal then, as the source says, is to what? Reroute the traffic?
Pretty much. Reroute that mental process entirely. The aim is to train your brain to form a direct, really strong connection. So the English word cat, the sound, the written form, the associated idea connects directly to the meaning, the actual image or concept of the furry animal,
Completely skipping the native language label for it.
completely bypassing it. That direct link is how a native English speaker's brain works. When they think of that animal, the English word cat is just there. It's immediately, automatically accessible. No intermediate step needed.
So we're talking about building new neural pathways, basically, creating these direct express lanes in your brain.
That's a great way to put it. Direct routes from the English word or concept straight to its meaning, and also linking it to the English structures needed to use it.
So that old native language translation path becomes, like, less necessary, less used.
Hopefully, yeah. Especially for real-time speaking. You want it to become something you rely on much, much less often. Maybe only for very complex or abstract ideas initially.
You're aiming to create a new default setting for your brain when it's operating in English mode.
Exactly. A fundamental shift in the internal wiring, you could say.
Okay, that really clarifies the why and the what. So how do we actually do it? How do we start building these new direct pathways? Let's get practical. Step one sounds almost too simple.
It does sound simple, doesn't it? But its simplicity is actually its strength. Because you can weave it into your day without needing, like, intense study time or specific materials.
Okay.
Step one is all about starting simple English thinking internally. This isn't about speaking out loud yet or writing things down. It's purely about your internal monologue.
The voice inside my head.
That's the one. The thoughts running through your mind all day long, even when you're just on your own doing nothing in particular.
So wait, even when I'm just like walking down the street or maybe waiting for the kettle to boil or just sitting on the bus staring out the window, I can be actively training my brain for this direct English thinking.
Absolutely. That's the perfect time for it. The whole purpose here, as the source points out, is to start training your brain's background processing.
Ah.
You're beginning to weave English into your most basic thought patterns, the ones that often just happen silently, almost subconsciously. You're giving English a little job to do, even when there's no external pressure to speak.
Okay, so what does that actually look like? What kind of simple thoughts are we talking about here? Give me some more concrete examples.
Yeah, the source gives some great, really relatable ones. So imagine you're walking outside. Instead of your inner voice just defaulting to your native language to describe what you see,
Mm-hmm.
you make a conscious little switch. You look around and form simple, descriptive English thoughts. Like you said before, the sun is shining. Simple.
Okay.
But you could expand easily. Look up, the sky is blue today, or maybe those clouds look gray. Look at the trees. Those trees are very tall. Or the leaves are green. See someone walking a dog. That's a cute dog. Or that dog is running fast.
So it's like being a silent narrator of my own life, but forcing myself to do it in basic English.
Exactly. A running commentary in simple English. If you're at home, say, making coffee, you can think, okay, need water, boil the kettle, get a mug, add coffee, pour water, just narrating the steps.
Or commuting.
Perfect time. Look out the window. Lots of cars today. Traffic is slow. That building is new. Or I see a bus. Even super simple things like getting dressed, putting on my socks. These shoes are red. It's about describing the concrete, immediate reality around you using basic English words and phrases you already know.
Okay, I get the what. But why does this seemingly really basic practice actually help break the translation habit? What's happening neurologically when I do this?
Right, this is the key bit. By consciously forming these simple internal statements in English, you are actively bypassing your native language for those specific concepts in that moment.
Ah,
You're forcing your brain to connect the English word sun directly to the experience of seeing the bright thing in the sky, not to the native language word for sun first.
uh,
You're connecting tree directly to the image and concept of the tree, not its translation. You're actively building those direct links. The source talks about linking the English words or simple phrases directly to the actual objects, actions, or states they represent in the real world. You're doing it without first activating the native language label for that thing.
So every time I think the sky is blue while looking at the blue sky, I'm essentially weakening the path that goes native word for sky, blue, native word for blue, English sentence,
Yes.
and strengthening the direct path that goes sky is blue.
Precisely. You're starving the old indirect pathway by creating and actively feeding this new direct English to meaning pathway. You're cutting out the middleman right from the start, at least for these simple, concrete ideas.
It's like building the foundation brick by brick.
That's exactly it. Every conscious repetition strengthens that direct link between the English phrase and the actual sensory experience, the meaning, without needing the native language crutch. Doing this consistently, even just for bits and pieces throughout the day, starts making English more readily available for these basic descriptions inside your own head.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, step 1, integrate simple internal English commentary on daily life. What's step 2 there? How do we build on that foundation?
Step 2 builds directly on this, but makes it a bit more focused, a bit more active. It's about actively naming objects around you in English.
Okay, so less about general observation like the sun is shining,
Yeah.
and more about pointing mentally or literally at things and saying their English name.
Yes, exactly. You're consciously engaging with your immediate environment and deliberately practicing the retrieval of the specific English label for items.
Right.
The source suggests doing this quite intentionally, maybe taking a minute just to look around the room you're in right now, your kitchen, your office, maybe even when you walk into a shop.
Like I'm looking at my desk now, and I think, this is a keyboard. That's my monitor. This is a coffee cup. That's a notebook. That's a pen. What that?
Exactly like that. The examples in the source nail this specificity. Looking at furniture, consciously think, or maybe even whisper, this is a table. Identifying your electronics, that's my laptop. Or if you're holding something, I'm holding a phone. Yeah. Or I'm drinking water.
It still sounds incredibly simple, though, just naming things.
Yeah.
How powerful can that really be in terms of, rewiring my brain away from translation?
And this is where, as the source points out, the surprising power lies. It's the repetition and the conscious act of labeling. That's the key.
Okay.
Every single time you look at your laptop and consciously retrieve and think or say the word laptop in English, you are actively reinforcing the direct neural pathway, the one that connects the visual recognition of that specific object directly to the English word for it.
Not object, pet, native word, English word.
Exactly. You're strengthening that direct connection, making it stronger, faster, more easily accessible than the roundabout translation route. You're literally practicing pulling the English word straight from the concept of the object itself, over and over again.
It really is like building muscle memory, isn't it? But
Right.
for these specific word concept links in English.
That's a perfect way to think about it. The more you perform that action directly accessing the English label, the more automatic and faster that retrieval becomes.
Like carving a path in a forest, you said.
Exactly. The first few times, it's slow, maybe awkward. You have to consciously think, what's the English word for this? But the more you walk that direct English path by naming things,
The clearer and faster it gets.
precisely, and the old, overgrown native language detour becomes less appealing, less necessary. Maybe eventually you barely notice it's there for these common objects.
And the source suggests a brilliant way to ramp this up, make it more engaging. Play a 5-minute game.
Yes. I love this suggestion. It adds a layer of intentionality and, crucially, speed, which is really effective.
How does it work again?
Set a timer for, say, 5 minutes. Look around wherever you are, your room, your kitchen, outside, and just name everything you see in English as
Right.
fast as you can, silently in your head, or maybe whispering if you're alone.
Ooh, I like that. Adding the speed element makes it feel more like a drill, less like just passively observing. A little bit of pressure.
It does.
Yeah.
And that speed element is critical for actively fighting the translation habit. When you force yourself to name things quickly, your brain often doesn't have the luxury of time to go down the familiar native language path first.
It has to grab the quickest label available.
Exactly. And by consistently practicing retrieving the English word quickly, you're training your brain to make the English label the fastest, most automatic option when you see that object. It actively undermines the slower, multi-step translation process.
So over time, this game makes the English naming quicker, more reflexive. You see a chair, you just think chair instantly.
That's the goal, not silly ready chair or whatever the native word is. Just boom, chair. It builds automaticity.
Okay, this is great. So step 1, simple internal thoughts all day. Step 2, focused object naming, maybe with the speed game. What's the next logical step up in complexity?
Step 3 is the natural and really necessary progression from single words, moving towards thinking in full sentences.
Ah, okay, so putting those words together.
Exactly. Once you're getting more comfortable recognizing and labeling individual items or basic concepts directly in English internally, the next stage is to start connecting those words, using the basic building blocks of English sentences, the basic structures.
So it's not just identifying table anymore, but maybe describing something about the table or what I'm doing at the table using a whole sentence.
Precisely. The complexity increases just a notch, but the core principle stays the same. Keep the entire thought process within English. So instead of your internal thought just being the noun table or maybe chair, your thoughts start forming complete sentences. They might be short, simple sentences, but they're complete, describing simple situations, actions, observations.
Like that really clear example the source gave about waiting for the bus. That hit home for me.
Yes, it's a perfect illustration. It's such a common scenario where that translation delay can really show up.
Yeah.
So instead of your first internal thought being the native language word for bus, which you'd then have to translate before you could say anything, your internal thought process jumps directly to a full English sentence, expressing the situation. I'm waiting for the bus. Or maybe the bus is late today. You're processing the whole situation, the waiting, the concept of lateness, and expressing it immediately using English sentence structure and vocabulary. No translation needed.
That feels much closer to actual spontaneous communication, doesn't it? You're not just labeling a thing. You're processing a whole dynamic situation or a state and forming a response or description for it.
Exactly. You're moving beyond nouns. Another great example from the source was linking the weather to an action or feeling, instead of just thinking the native equivalent of nice weather.
Right.
The internal thought becomes a complete English sentence, connecting the observation to a possibility. The weather is nice, I should go for a walk. Or maybe, it's raining again, I need my umbrella. You're linking things together using English sentence patterns. Observation to need, observation to action.
And the source really emphasizes weaving this into everyday routines, right? Those moments when your mind isn't super busy with complex problem solving.
Absolutely. Mundane activities are perfect for this. Walking, cooking, cleaning, commuting, like you said. Even just scrolling through social media. Your mind often has some bandwidth during these times.
So while I'm washing the dishes, I could think.
Yeah, I'm washing the dishes now. The water is warm. There are a lot of plates today. Or while you're walking to the shop, I am walking to the shop. I need to buy milk. The street is noisy. You're constantly interacting with your environment or doing things you can describe using simple, often present tense English sentences.
You could even react internally to things you read or hear, couldn't you? Like read a headline online and think, that sounds interesting. Or overhear something and think, what do they mean by that?
Definitely. It's about making English the language of your internal processing for these everyday moments and reactions.
Okay, but why is this step, thinking in full sentences, so crucial? What does it add that just naming objects doesn't quite achieve?
This step is absolutely vital because it shifts your brain from just linking individual English words to concepts, to actually practicing and internalizing the structural patterns of English, the grammar, the syntax, how words actually fit together to make meaning in English.
The construction part.
Exactly. Thinking in full sentences, even really simple ones, forces you to practice sentence construction. You're using verbs, conjugating them, even if it's just simple forms like am, is, are, or basic present tense, thinking about word order, all in your mind.
Which is essential for actually speaking, because we speak in sentences, not just lists of words.
Precisely. You're training your brain to assemble thoughts using English syntax automatically, internally, before you even open your mouth. This internal fluency in sentence building is a necessary stepping stone to fluent speaking. You're moving from just knowing the bricks, words, to practicing how to actually build walls, sentences.
You're building the grammatical framework, the scaffolding for communication, not just collecting the individual parts.
That's a great way to put it. It's a critical step. It makes English function as a system for expressing complete ideas directly in your head, rather than just being a vocabulary list you consult after thinking in your native language. It practices the use of the language in a meaningful, structured way internally.
Okay, this progression makes a lot of sense. Simple internal thoughts, then focused object naming with speed, then thinking in full sentences during daily tasks. Now, what's step 4? The source hinted this is where it gets really interesting and starts to more directly mimic actual communication.
It absolutely gets fascinating here, yes. Step 4 is about having silent conversations in your head. This is a more advanced, more dynamic technique. It actively simulates real back-and-forth conversational exchanges, all internally.
Whoa, okay, so I'm not just thinking about my environment or my own actions anymore. I'm imagining interacting with other people and practicing the dialogue.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
It involves actively imagining scenarios where you typically need to speak English and then mentally running through the entire dialogue. Not just your part, but also anticipating what the other person might realistically say and then figuring out your response to that.
So you're not just forming random sentences like in step 3, you're forming responsive sentences, sentences that fit into a simulated conversation.
Precisely. It's about context and interaction.
The source gave that really vivid example about ordering coffee. Can you walk us through that again? How does that internal rehearsal work?
Yeah, it's a brilliant, super practical example because it's such a common, relatively low-stakes interaction that many learners encounter. Right? So imagine you're standing in line at a coffee shop. You know you're going to have to order in English soon. So in your head, you start by thinking about, okay, what do I need to say first? How do I kick this off? Okay, I'm next. What should I say to the barista?
Right, planning your opening move.
Yes, you formulate your request internally. Maybe you even practice the exact words you plan to use. I'll say, hi, can I have a latte, please? Or maybe, good morning, 1 latte, please. You might run through a couple of options or just settle on the one you feel most comfortable with.
Okay, got my line ready. But a conversation isn't just delivering one line, is it?
Not at all. It's a dynamic exchange. And this technique crucially includes anticipating the other person's likely response or questions.
Ah, okay.
So you think, what does the barista usually ask next? You anticipate common follow-up questions for that situation. The barista will probably ask, do you want that hot or iced? Or maybe, what size would you like? Or will that be for here or to go?
And then the really clever part, you mentally prepare your reply to those specific anticipated questions.
That's the key. Okay, if they ask hot or iced, I'll say, hot please. Or if they ask the size, I need to remember to say, medium please. Or for here, you run through the entire potential mini conversation in your mind, preparing your responses to the questions you expect.
Wow, okay, the benefit there feels
Yep.
huge. You're not just practicing isolated vocabulary or grammar points anymore. You're practicing the entire flow of a likely conversation.
Exactly.
You're anticipating common exchanges, and you're practicing retrieving the right information and the right sentence structure under simulated conversational pressure, even if it's just pressure you're putting on yourself in your head.
That is the core benefit, and that's why this step is so incredibly powerful for boosting speaking fluency and confidence. By actively rehearsing these imaginary conversations, you are proactively priming your brain for the real thing. You're practicing finding the right words, the right tone, the right sentence structure in a conversational context. This mental practice helps solidify common response patterns. It helps you connect specific cues, like a question from the barista, directly to the appropriate English reply.
Without needing to first translate their question into your native language, figure out your answer there, and then translate your answer back into English.
Precisely. You're building that direct cue-to-response link in English.
So when the real situation happens, when you actually step up to the counter, your brain isn't encountering this whole exchange cold. It's already run through practice drills.
Yes. It's like an athlete visualizing the game, or a musician mentally rehearsing a piece before playing it.
It makes total sense.
And it connects directly back to overcoming that translation delay. Because you've mentally rehearsed it, the necessary vocabulary and sentence structures are already kind of warmed up.
Right.
They're highly activated and linked to the specific conversational prompts you practiced.
So it's much more likely that when the real moment comes, you can access and produce the English response directly, faster, more automatically.
Far more likely. You've already strengthened the specific direct English pathways needed for that interaction. The delay caused by translation becomes much less probable, or at least significantly shorter.
It really is like building conversational muscle memory. The more scenarios you practice like this, even just silently in your head, the smoother and faster and more automatic the real performance is likely to be when you actually have to speak.
That's a perfect analogy. You're building fluency not just by knowing the language, but by practicing the act of retrieving and responding within simulated real-world contexts.
And you could apply this to so many situations, couldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Think about asking for directions. Excuse me, could you tell me how to get to the station? Anticipate responses like go straight, turn left, and practice saying thank you or buying a train ticket. Hello, one ticket to Oxford, please. Anticipate single or return, and practice return, please.
Or even just small talk, introducing yourself.
Definitely. Hi, my name is your name. Nice to meet you. Anticipate. Nice to meet you too. I'm their name. Practiced asking a follow-up. So what do you do? Or responding to, how was your weekend? Mentally practicing, it was good, thanks. Pretty relaxing. How about yours?
The possibilities are endless, really. And focusing on situations you actually encounter often would make the practice super relevant.
Exactly. Tailor it to your life. If you work in an office, practice common office exchanges. If you travel a lot, practice airport or hotel scenarios. Make it work for you.
Okay, fantastic. We've covered these 4 key steps: simple internal thoughts, naming objects with speed, thinking in full sentences, and these silent conversations. It feels like a really practical step-by-step way to build that direct English thinking skill. Now, let's shift focus slightly. Let's talk about the so what. Why does this matter so much in the real world, especially in English-speaking environments?
All right, this is where we connect the internal practice to the external reality. And our source material brings up a really important cultural or perhaps interactional point. How quick thinking and responding are often quite valued, or at least expected, in many English-speaking contexts.
That rings true, actually. Conversations, especially the more casual ones, can move pretty fast, can't they? There often seems to be a quicker rhythm, maybe, than in some other languages or cultural settings.
They absolutely can. Now, obviously, this varies hugely depending on the context, the people, the region. But generally speaking, particularly in informal chats, there's often an expectation of relatively quick, timely, natural-sounding answers.
People don't tend to leave really long pauses after someone asks us a question, do they?
Usually not. A pause stretching beyond maybe a second or two can sometimes start to feel a little noticeable,
Yeah.
a bit extended in a fast-moving back and forth.
And the source mentioned the potential outcome if you consistently have those longer pauses, even if it's just because you're busy translating in your head. It can unintentionally make the conversation feel a bit awkward, maybe a little stilted, or even like there's a misunderstanding happening.
Exactly. Not because your grammar is wrong or your vocabulary is bad, but purely because of the timing, the pace of your response.
Those pauses, even though they're just for internal processing, might get misinterpreted.
They can be sometimes. A native speaker who's used to a quicker cadence might inadvertently read a long pause as hesitation or uncertainty, or maybe even a lack of understanding.
Even if you understood perfectly, but we're just mentally translating your reply.
Right. And while many speakers are patient and understanding, of course, in lots of everyday situations, ordering coffee, asking a quick question, chatting with colleagues, the delay can disrupt the natural rhythm, the flow of the exchange. It might make the other person feel they need to repeat themselves or rephrase or jump in to fill the silence.
And that is why this brain training, thinking directly in English, is so fundamentally linked not just to being correct, but to sounding and actually feeling more fluent.
Precisely. It's about improving the speed and the smoothness of your internal cognitive processing, which then directly impacts the speed and smoothness of your spoken delivery.
The faster you can get those thoughts and sentences formed directly in English without needing that native language detour.
The more natural, the more timely, the more seemingly effortless your responses will be when you actually talk to people. You'll be much better positioned to keep pace in conversations, to jump in more spontaneously, and honestly just feel more comfortable and less stressed in those dynamic exchanges.
So this isn't just some abstract language learning theory for textbooks. It has a direct, tangible impact on how effectively and comfortably you can actually use English in the real world.
Absolutely.
It's about building fluency in that broader sense, not just accuracy, but the whole package. Pace, rhythm, flow.
Making the language feel less like a difficult puzzle you're solving under pressure.
Exactly. And
Well,
more like a readily available tool you can just pick up and use naturally to express yourself.
it moves English from being something you consciously process step by step to something you use more instinctively. And that shift, that feeling, is huge for confidence and overall communication success.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. We've got a clear picture of why translation happens, why it's a barrier, the goal of direct thinking, and those 4 practical steps to get there. Plus, why the speed this training helps build is so important for real-world interaction.
Yeah.
Now, let's crystallize this into action.
Right. Time for the challenge. Based directly on everything we've talked about today, here are some actionable steps you can start trying out, maybe even today.
Okay, first challenge. Dedicate just 5 minutes. Literally set a timer specifically to step 2. Naming objects around you in English. Use that 5-minute game idea. Wherever you are right now, look around. Your room, kitchen, office, outside. Identify everything you can see. And think or whisper quietly the English word for each object. Try to do it fairly quickly. Push yourself a little on the speed to build that automatic recall.
Good one. Second challenge. Pick one specific, simple daily activity you do anyway. Maybe making your breakfast or taking a shower or your commute or washing the dishes tonight. And consciously make an effort to integrate step 3. Thinking in full, simple English sentences during that activity. Narrate what you're doing or observing internally. I am pouring the milk, the water feels warm, that car is driving fast, I am drying this cup. Just choose one routine activity and try to describe it internally in English while you're doing it.
Nice. And third challenge, take a moment, maybe later today when you have a quiet minute, and try step 4. Imagine a short, simple conversation scenario that you might realistically find yourself in. Could be ordering food, asking a stranger for directions, a quick chat with a colleague about the weather, buying something small. Mentally practice your possible opening line, then anticipate what the other person might realistically say back, and then practice your response to that. All in English, all in your head. Just run through maybe 2 or 3 turns of a potential mini conversation.
Excellent. And while you try these, we'd really encourage you to reflect a little on your own internal process. As you're doing the object naming or trying to think in sentences, do you notice yourself slipping back into translation? When does it happen? What seems to trigger it for you?
Yeah, becoming aware of the habit is half the battle, isn't it?
It really is. And think about the methods we discussed. Are the things you've already tried? Which of these steps, the simple thoughts, the object naming, the full sentences, the silent conversations, feels like the most useful starting point for you right now? Or maybe the most challenging? Where can you realistically fit even just a few minutes of this practice into your day?
And remember, like we said, this is a crucial piece, but it's one piece of the bigger language learning picture. The source material hints at this too. The next important step is often about reinforcing everything you're learning, using repetition, active recall, making those words, phrases, and sentence patterns really stick so they're there when you need them. We'll definitely dig into reinforcement and memory techniques in future deep dives.
Absolutely. Continuous intentional practice is the name of the game here. These internal exercises, especially at first, they might feel a bit weird, maybe slow, maybe even frustrating sometimes, because you are consciously trying to build new mental habits while ignoring old comfortable ones.
Yeah, forging new paths takes effort.
It does, so be patient with yourself.
Okay, sure.
But consistency really is key. Even just short bursts of this kind of practice each day will gradually strengthen those new direct pathways in your brain. They will get faster, stronger, more automatic over time.
So keep practicing, keep trying to think in English, even when no one else is listening. Just trust the process. It genuinely will make a difference in how quickly and naturally the language comes to you when you need it.
And finally, as always, here's a little something extra to chew on, a thought to leave you with as you experiment with this. We've talked about how training your brain to think directly in English can speed up your spoken responses and make conversations flow better. So the question is, if this kind of focused, deliberate mental practice can do that, what other, maybe unexpected benefits might it have for your overall experience with English?
Interesting. Like spillover effects.
Exactly. Could deliberately building these direct English to meaning links also impact, say, how quickly you read English, or how easily you understand spoken English without mentally translating? Could it make formulating your thoughts for writing in English feel smoother? Could it even boost your overall confidence in tackling more complex communication situations down the line? Basically, could this type of internal brain training be a key not just to speaking fluency, but to achieving a deeper, more fundamental cognitive comfort and agility within the English language itself?
Definitely something to mull over as you go about your day and try out these techniques. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into training your brain for direct English thinking.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time, keep practicing, keep thinking directly, and keep learning.